Hello, everybody. Thank you for joining us. So, welcome to this Arthritis Action webinar, how to get the most from your rheumatology appointment. My name's Mark Williams. I'm the Services Manager for Arthritis Action and will be performing the moderating duties today. So first off, I want to let you know that UCB Pharma have provided financial support for this webinar. UCB has no influence over the webinar content or selection of speakers. Now, before we get underway, I have a few housekeeping items. You'll all be muted throughout the webinar, so if you have any questions for either of our speakers, please do type them in the Q&A box and we will endeavour to answer as many of these as possible during the time allotted. But in the event that we do run out of time, we'll get back to you with an answer within a few days by email, so please bear with us on those. And finally, to remind you that this webinar is not a substitute for medical advice, so always consult your doctor or medical professional for any questions regarding your own medical conditions. So, without further ado, I'd like to introduce our speakers. So first up, we have, returning again, Dr. Wendy Holden. Wendy is an honorary consultant rheumatologist at North Hampshire Hospital's NHS Foundation Trust, specialising in arthritis and pain management, and also the medical advisor for Arthritis Action. Hello, Wendy.
Hi, thank you. Good to be here again.
Lovely to have you back. And also joining us is Arthritis Action member Jack Gaskin. Jack is a catering business owner living in London. Having been diagnosed in his mid-30s, he's been living with psoriatic arthritis for the last 6 years. So, hello, Jack.
Hi, Mark. How you doing? Nice to see you again.
Yeah, very good. Thank you. Good to see you too.
You're very generous to me because I've actually had it for 7 years. I'm 41 now, so.
Oh, apologies.
That's okay, but yeah, I'll take it.
Okay, great. I mean, so that's a very brief and slightly inaccurate history from me then, it seems. I was wondering, could you tell us a little bit more about your arthritis?
Yeah, definitely. So basically what happened to me was when I was 34, I started to develop psoriasis. And at that time then I had a business and it was coming towards the end of that business and we had to shut it down because it wasn't being very successful. And the week that I was shutting my business down, my girlfriend at the time, she broke up with me without giving me much warning. So basically, you know, in the space of a week, I basically lost my business and lost my girlfriend, and she moved out basically in a week. So my life pretty much turned upside down, and the stress from that really accelerated my psoriasis. But I didn't really equate stress to having psoriasis. I just thought it was a bit of dandruff because it started on my head. Then it started a little bit on my face, but because it was winter time, I just assumed that it was dry weather and it was just like dry skin. I then had started also working in the kitchen for Google. And yeah, I didn't really think much of it. I just thought it was the chemicals from the kitchen. I thought, because I was working in a kitchen, like the chemicals were just irritating my skin. But over the sort of next few months, it started to get quite bad, the psoriasis. And then I'd say after probably about sort of 6 months of having psoriasis, I started a new job. I became a co-founder of an app for chefs. And then in that time, one day I came into work and my co-founder, he was like, "Oh, Jack, what's happened to you?" I was like, "Oh, nothing, thanks." He's like, "Why is your head all bleeding?" He's like, "Have you been in a fight or something? Have you been attacked over the weekend?" I was like, no, it's just this like dandruffy psoriasis. It's dandruff. It's really, really bad. And basically, he forced me to go to the GP. And that's the first time I went to see a doctor about my condition. And from there, I spent about 6 months getting treated for eczema. And it was quite funny because now it starts to spread all over my body. So I had the patches of dry skin everywhere and it's very irritable. But every time I'd go see the nurse, she would give me a different medication, building me up to steroids. And I'd go back every couple of weeks and I'd have more flare, like more bad skin. that medication was actually making it worse. And then she turned around to me one day and just said, Jack, look, every time you come here, like I just seem to be making it worse. I really don't know what's wrong with you. And very fortunate at my GP at the time, there was a doctor that had a dermatological background. And then she just pulled him out of a consultation and just said, look, I've been treating Jack for 6 months now and I'm just making it worse and worse. And could you just spend, a couple of minutes with him? As soon as I saw that doctor, it completely changed. He literally spent 20 seconds. He noticed that my dry skin was mainly on the outside of my joints. So as soon as he noticed that, he was like, you haven't got eczema, because eczema is usually the inside joints. You've got psoriasis. And I was like, oh yes, finally, like someone's, giving me some advice, like probably can get better now. And then that just sort of basically led to another 8 months worth of treatment, but this time being treated for psoriasis. But unfortunately, all the medication that they kept giving me over the eight sort of next months didn't really help, to the point that my fingernails started falling out and my hair was like really fell out. And that was the first sign that this condition had changed from psoriasis into psoriatic arthritis. But with that happening, it allowed me to then enter the hospital care and getting to see dermatologists and rheumatoid specialists. And I was kind of fortunate because the arthritis was so quick in developing. I literally, within a couple of, I'd say, weeks of getting swollen knuckles, it pretty much taken over most of my hands and most of my toes. So in a weird way, it being so aggressive was a good thing. But it was a horrible time because I just started as a co-founder again, and the business was an app for chefs, and I was a sales director. And the problem that I had was that I was going to see lots of different chefs and lots of different meetings, bow my head over, my fingernail would be showing them my app and my fingernails were falling off, and I had like really bad hair loss and had lots of scabs everywhere from the psoriasis. And it made me, that period of time was made me very, very self-conscious. And I know for like my mum as well, she found it like very upsetting to see me like basically look like that. So that's the sort of lead up to my sort of diagnosis and to where I got. And I think the other thing that really affected my confidence as well is because it was at the end of a relationship. People always think, well, you should go back out there and start dating and whatnot. But I also had really bad psoriasis on my like groin area, which I think is important to talk about because a lot of people won't talk about that. And obviously, you're not going to want to get naked in front of someone because they're going to think you're going to have like the worst STD that they've seen. So it was really that sort of year, like with it just accelerating was really horrible, like really, really horrible. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Jack. Thank you. So, Wendy, let's go over to you for a minute now then. So, as this is about how to get the most out of your rheumatology appointment, let's start at the beginning. So what happens in a rheumatology appointment? Can you take us through what people can expect if they go?
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks for sharing that, Jack. That was not young people don't want to talk about that, but that's really important. Okay, so once you've arrived, you finally arrived at the hospital. It's your turn. It's your big moment, and you're going to sit down and see a doctor probably for the first time, an expert in rheumatology. So I think it's important to know one of the surprising things is that you're only going to have half an hour, which is a very, very short amount of time. And that's the longest you're ever going to have with a consultant, really. That's probably the one and only time you'll have half an hour. So there is a lot to cover in that half an hour, and there's not very much time to ask questions. So later on, I'm going to talk about how you can get yourself ready for that very important appointment. So you'll arrive at the hospital. You may well be weighed. You might have your blood pressure measured. You might have your urine tested. So there'll be a nurse to do all that for you. And then you'll come in and talk to the doctor. It's important, of course, that they introduce themselves. If they haven't introduced themselves, please ask them who they are. That person might be somebody quite senior, so it might be someone that's been in rheumatology for a long time, or it might be a rheumatology doctor who's on their very first day. So it's important to find out who you're actually talking to, and maybe even what their experience is. So they will talk you through the various problems that you've had. And then they will examine you. They will examine your joints. They may well examine other parts of you, like your chest and your tummy and your spine. And after that, it's very likely that they will, if you haven't had blood tests done already, it's very likely that they will arrange some blood tests, possibly some X-rays, which can sometimes usually be done on the same day. And then they may well want to do some more imaging, for example, ultrasound or MRI or some other form of radiology, and then you will have that on another day. And then at the end of that session, you may or may not have come to a conclusion about what's going on, what your diagnosis is likely to be. If it's clear what's wrong, then you will have a discussion with them about the diagnosis and what's going to happen next. If it's not clear, then you will go away and have your tests and come away for a follow-up appointment. But hopefully there will be something done at that first appointment to make you feel better, and there will be some initial information gathering and giving. So it's supposed to be a two-way thing, this, so you do feel free to speak up. Then you will come back at some point for your follow-up. And that's even, in a way, that's even worse, because not even worse. It's worse in the fact that you've only got 15 minutes for your follow-up. And that is a ridiculously short amount of time if you haven't been told what's wrong. And there will be all sorts of questions buzzing through your mind. You know, what's going to happen to me now? What's the future going to hold? What medication am I going to have? Do I have to take this forever? What's going to happen to my family or my job? There's millions of questions to ask. So it's really important that to get prepared for this. But usually at the follow-up, you will be told what the diagnosis is, and usually some medication will be suggested. And if this means that you need to stay within rheumatology, then the chances are you will hopefully be offered another appointment with one of the rheumatology nurses, where you will have loads of opportunity to go through all the things that are troubling you. You'll have a much longer appointment with some of the rheumatology specialist nurses. So don't give up hope if you feel like you've been rushed at the initial steps. So that's the kind of nuts and bolts of what happens in an appointment. We'll talk about how to be prepared later on. What was your experience of all of that, Jack? The early days.
It's well, I wrote down a few things, like when you were talking, Wendy, and I wrote down like mysterious and hopes and failures, because what happens with me certainly is because it was such a runaway train and it's so quick, from just having a bit of like dandruff to then getting arthritis. But then once the sciatica arthritis took over, it really set in quite quickly. Every time I was like, oh, wicked. I found out that it's psoriasis. That means they can treat it. Then they're like, oh, well, now it's turned into sciatica arthritis. You're like, okay, well, I didn't know that could happen. And then, then after that, you do start asking lots of questions, because, they talk about the different medications that you might be able to be put on. But then a lot of times they might fail, and it is a step-by-step approach that you have to take, because you have to build up your medication. And there's a lot of questions that you have, because a lot of the medication is bad for your health anyway, in terms of your kidney function and your liver function. So you have that sort of worry. But I think the biggest problem that I had at that particular time, and I think it's a problem that most people have to come to terms with, is that there isn't a cure, and that this is probably your life. You're probably going to be on maybe an immunosuppressant for the rest of your life. And that's quite shocking, because certainly for me, mine was from stress and going through emotional turmoil. And I thought, well, if I get to a happy place, like, why should my body be attacking itself? And, why has my body lived for 34 years in harmony with itself? And it's quite hard to take that one day, your body just sort of turns on you. But then what tends to happen as well is as the arthritis really takes hold of you, it really starts robbing you of a lot of things that you used to be able to do and used to enjoy. Simple things like being able to run on uneven surfaces or go camping. You seem to go over a sort of couple of years period where you just basically find things that you can't do anymore. And no one can really give you an answer. And no one can really tell you where it's going to end. And I think that's one of the hardest things to come to terms with, if I'm honest with you. And because you have got such a short time with the doctor, they're not really there to reassure you. You kind of just get plonked into the room. They might test your fingers really, really quickly, test your joints, see if they're swollen, and then that's your appointment, and then you're back out there. And so you almost come away with more questions than answers.
Absolutely. I mean, I think if we had double the time in the consultation, it would be very easy to be more holistic, wouldn't it? And be able to ask you about work and things like that. But the reality of it is there's really such a short time and you've got quite a lot of things to do. And I think there's often a real unmet need for patients in terms of information and what's happening with them, and the sort of softer things like social life, the important things, but not the things that are covered in a medical consultation. So did you have the experience of talking to one of the specialist nurses, Jack, or did you not?
No, I didn't.
No, you haven't. I should talk about that then. So all rheumatology teams have excellent specialist nurses who are experts really in all aspects of inflammatory arthritis, and they have much more time to discuss with you the kind of things that are important. Things like lifestyle and exercise and healthy living, smoking, weight, those kind of things, the kind of things we talk about Arthritis Action all the time. So if you're not aware of those, I'm sure they have them in your department, and anyone that hasn't seen a nurse should absolutely ask for nurse appointment. They're absolutely essential, and they're complete diamonds. So and it's also useful to know who else is there in the team. So often there may well be physiotherapists attached to the team, occupational therapists. There's supposed to be all sorts of people who may or may not be there. Things like clinical psychology may or may not be there, podiatry. But there's usually a lot of people peripheral to the team that can often help with some of those worries as well.
I mean, I found personally that the best information or the help that I found the most was actually joining people like Arthritis Action, or just connecting with other people with arthritis.
Yeah, absolutely.
I found that I found that you have to try a lot of different things as well. So I did try changing my diet. I tried to go vegan for a bit of time. That didn't really work for me. I tried cutting out nightshade foods, which is supposed to cause inflammatory. That didn't really help too much.
Don't let Martin hear you say that.
No. But one thing that did help, actually, I think 3 big things that really help is it does actually help to cut down on your alcohol intake, sleeping, making sure you get proper rest, and smoking. Giving up smoking really helped as well. So yeah, but the problem is sometimes when you're in a lot of pain, you do want to have a drink to try and ease it. And I know a lot of other people with arthritis, and that was their sort of coping sort of strategy. So yeah, I do know. Yeah, but you can fall victim to that as well.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I found one of the biggest things that for me was to go back into meditation, and I had to start to have a lot of Reiki done to me as well. And I found that holistic approach really, really helped me, because I think where your nervous system or your body's so enraged and fighting itself, if you can find things that can soothe you and calm you down, I think that has a really strong impact on your lifestyle. And I honestly believe that having Reiki done made my hair grow back to how much it is now.
Excellent. I mean, nobody really understands this, but we know for sure that the stress and bad sleep and the immune system are linked. So if there's anything that we can do to reduce all of that, then that's likely to maximize our chances of getting a good recovery. I would agree with that.
Yeah.
What's next there, Mark? Sorry, Jack.
I'm glad you brought up work as well, because I had a huge problem with my work in that sort of journey. So obviously I was a business owner, and then when that went under, I didn't really want to become a sales director or a founder again, but I ended up doing that again. And just before lockdown, because my condition was so out of control, I thought I've just got to try and just get rid of all stress. So I left that job and I basically just worked in a local cafe because I thought there's no stress doing that, and I quite enjoyed that. And when I started to do that job, I could manage to do like 35 hours a week, like standing, no problem. But as the arthritis took over, I found that I had to keep cutting down my hours over the next sort of year. And then luckily when COVID happened, I love COVID because it really gave me time to adjust to my condition. And I just used to just go to the park and just meditate or just be in the sun. But when it came back out of, and in between that period, I got to be put onto a biologic as well. Mm-hmm. And then coming back out after the COVID, I had to go back into full-time work again. And I decided to carry on working in a cafe. And then I just really just went down from there. I could only do 35 hours. Then I dropped down to 30, then to 25, then to 20. And that was really stressful. And in that time, I also moved house. Moved to a really bad house that was really damp, really cold, had lots of hard floors. And I was really like burning through my savings. And there wasn't much sort of help or support. And the company that I worked at, the cafe that I worked at, I left because they just wouldn't give me any provisions to help me with my condition. So I decided to work in another coffee shop because I didn't want to have a stressful job. And then, that kept getting worse. And one of the reasons why I left my specialist at the time was because she made a joke about, I said to her, look, I'm really struggling, like financially now because of my condition. And then she made a sort of joke about it. And then that led me to wanting to change my specialist at the time. Yeah. But I also moved house as well. And I moved house again, and that had a massive change in my health as well.
Did you find it difficult, the decision to go on a biologic, or did you think this is going to be good for me? Was it easy for you to make that choice?
Not really, because I was already on an immunosuppressant that I was injecting. I was on the top whack, and because the arthritis, to be fair to psoriasis, that cleared up on the immunosuppressant. And I thought having psoriasis was bad, but my God, like having arthritis I'd much rather look scabby than have arthritis. And the arthritis at that time was just moving around, and it just kept affecting different parts of my body. So it started off in my knees predominantly, and then it moved down into my ankles and into my feet. My feet is where I have the biggest problems now. And, it was to the point where I couldn't really stand that long, and standing was incredibly painful. And it was also having the chronic fatigue as well, like I not being able to think straight. And, I'd walk to the supermarket, and then, which was only like 5-10 minutes, and then I'd come home and have to sleep for like an hour. So, to go on the extra medication wasn't hard. And I really hoped that maybe being on a biologic, then maybe I could come off the immunosuppressant. But unfortunately, I couldn't do that, unfortunately.
And you've stayed on both, have you?
Yeah. I'm still on both, yeah. And I have had a change in my biologic. So I was on a biologic, Then when I moved house, they put me onto a biosimilar. But then recently, probably about, I'd say 12 months ago, I asked my specialist to go back on a full biologic because I just didn't think the biosimilar was so effective. And I only knew that advice because another arthritis patient told me that you could actually ask for that. And that was a really big decision for me because obviously there's only a certain amount of biologics. So I was terrified of coming off one biologic, then being put onto another one because I thought, well, if my body ever becomes immune to that biologic, then there's only a few more left that I can take. And I think when someone's got arthritis or psoriatic arthritis, there's always that trade-off where you're okay enough. You live through pain and stiffness and you get to a level of tolerance where you kind of find it acceptable. And, you know, one of the other reasons why I decided to change my specialist was one day I was having a conversation with her and she was like, yeah, but, you know, you shouldn't be, if you're under an immunosuppressant on the biologic, you shouldn't have any stiffness or any pain. You should be like fine. I just thought to myself, you know, I've been coming to see you for 5 or 6 years. Most of the time she missed the appointment anyway. You just don't have a understanding of, you know, how I've had to change jobs, I've had to change housing, to just try and make myself healthy enough to live in like a adequate life. And that was kind of a big turning point when I thought I need to change my specialist as well.
Absolutely. We'll talk about that in a minute, won't we, Mark? I think.
Yes, of course. Yeah. So one thing I do want to touch on first is something we do talk a lot about at Arthritis Action is building like a toolkit.
Yeah.
Right. So that I'd be curious to hear both of your thoughts on what kind of toolkit can you build to help you pre and post appointment.
Yeah, absolutely. So I've been thinking about this. So if I was a rheumatology patient, I've been thinking about how would I prepare for this. I'll tell you about my experience of being a useless patient later on. But anyway, first of all, really, really important, be prepared. So don't go like a Boy Scout. Don't go in there with a complete blank and expect just to be fixed. It's really important that you start writing things down before you even get in the room. So write down your number 3 top concerns and think about which ones you want to discuss first. In other words, you know, what's going to happen to me? What's my diagnosis? Is this cancer? Whatever your concerns are, the 3 top concerns, write them down. And then think about what are your goals for that appointment? What do you want to get out of it? Do you want to get some more investigations? Do you want a diagnosis? What is it you want? You want some pain relief? Make sure you're clear about what you want before you get there. And I would always recommend taking somebody with you because the studies have shown that you'll only remember a tiny fraction of what is said to you. So it's really good if you can take someone with, a friend or relative, to write it all down. Remember your glasses, be on time. Don't waste any of that 30 minutes. You've got to use every single little bit. And as I said, ask the name of the person that you're talking to and make sure you write it down. That will make them focus their mind. So the other things you need to do before you get there is you can really help speed things along by writing down a little bit of what's been happening to you. Write down your symptoms, write down if you've got pain, write down where it hurts, when it hurts, how long it's been hurting for, and what makes it better or worse. And always take a list of your medication. It's doctors often don't know what medication you're taking. It's very helpful to know that. So that's how you need to be prepared. So once you got to the point of making a diagnosis, before that step, you need to ask why to the person that's sending you off for tests. Why do I need to have these tests? After the diagnosis, it can be useful to say, what is my diagnosis? And another useful question is, how do you know that that's my diagnosis? What tests tell you that that is my diagnosis? And that can be really helpful to help focus the mind of the person in front of you to make sure they've thought of every possibility. They will be trying to do that, but that can really help focus their mind. What do my test results mean? It can be very useful. So you're going to take charge of your test results for the future. You're going to be having a lot of blood tests, and you need to know what that all means, when they're normal, when they're not normal. Can you give me any information on my diagnosis? What websites can I go to? And have you got a leaflet about this condition? Next, what a lot of people ask me is doing nothing an option? And I think that's quite a good question, actually, because for some people doing nothing might be an option for a short amount of time. Next, when are you actually going to find out when you're going to have follow-up? A sneaky thing that some doctors do, which is very naughty, is say, oh, we'll see you in a month. And they know, or 3 months, and they know blooming well there are no appointments for 6 months, and that's very naughty. So it's well worth asking you, does that mean a month, or does that mean 6 months? Because it's important that your expectations are managed. What can I do to help myself is obviously a very useful question. What should I do if I'm in trouble or things get worse? And it's really important that you get some contact numbers of useful people as well. So either how can I contact you, the consultant? Can I contact you by email? Can I telephone you? And how do I get hold of your nurses? So all of this is about assertiveness and being bold. And that's why it's kind of useful to have somebody with you sometimes to sort of, so that you feel confident about asking all these questions. Yeah. I can write all these things down if that would be helpful.
I 100% agree with you, because I think only in the last 2 years that I've really been a lot more assertive in my appointments. And I think, well, the couple of reasons why, if I think back, a lot of time just after COVID, I never saw the same doctor. I kept getting locums, so I never had a continuity of care. So I was always seeing a different person, and the appointments were very quick. And the problem with arthritis and psoriatic arthritis is sometimes when you go to those appointments, you're healthy and you look fit. And it's very easy to forget what the bad days are like. It's very easy to forget like the patterns, to try and log the patterns. But also, you've got to ask them for extra help on what else is available. So after I decided to change my specialist, I asked to have one specialist that I'd seen a couple of times in my care, and he just happened to be like the head of the department by funny chance. And he's been wonderful since I've met him. He's managed to get me orthotics in my shoes so I can walk better. I've got special splint socks, so they pull your feet up at night time to help your tendons. He's really big on, like, if I need a steroid jab, he'll let me come in for a steroid jab, and he's really reactive to what I need. And before, my previous specialist, I wouldn't have had that. But I think in a weird way, when you've got it, and because it's such a lonely condition and it's very isolating, when you do have that appointment, you're just kind of grateful to someone that will listen to you. But you might not be in the middle of a flare-up, so you forget how awful it can be, basically. So yeah,
I agree, and lots of people with arthritis they're very brave, and they want to kind of please the person that's in front of them, and that's obviously not what you're there for. So keeping a diary of your symptoms can be very useful as well, because you're right. You know, in a snapshot, you might be there on a good day, and the person would get the wrong impression. Absolutely.
Yeah, definitely. So I would definitely write if you can, write a weekly journal of your condition, and then try and see if there's any patterns that you notice.
That would include side effects and things like that, of course, as well, with the medication, wouldn't it?
Yeah, definitely. Yeah.
So Wendy, you mentioned already about sort of your experience as a patient. So
I just thought it might be helpful to share how useless even people who know the system can be, because I was just hopeless. So this is a story about my GP. So a few years ago, before lockdown, I had some significant upper abdominal pain, and I thought it was just a bit of, indigestion or something like that. But it went on and it went on, and I tried all the usual remedies, and I bought myself over-the-counter stuff, and I'd had the, what would have been appropriate. And I thought, okay, it's not gone. I better go to the doctor. And the stupid me, I just went in there not really thinking. And I assumed that doctor that I was going to see would know that I was a doctor, and we would have a reasonable discussion, and I would come out with an endoscopy appointment, which is what I thought I probably needed. I needed a telescope to have a look down there to see what was what. And so I went in, said hi to the doctor. I was the first one up that morning, and he had obviously not read my notes at all, and I never go to the doctors. And halfway through this discussion, it suddenly became obvious that he didn't know that I was a doctor, and I was too embarrassed to tell him. And he said, "So you've got a little bit of tummy ache, have you? And I'll have an examine of you." And he felt my tummy and sent me out with a prescription of the pills that I'd already had. And I actually went and bought them and took them. I can't believe I did this. And I didn't say anything. So I came out feeling, oh no, I was so stupid. And then this went on. I took the blooming pills another month on. And then I went to see another doctor. I thought, okay, this time I'm going to make sure he knows I'm a doctor. So I told her I went in, I'm a doctor. And she looked at my age and she said, "This is upper abdominal pain I've got." And she started saying, "Have you got bloating?" "Oh no, I've not got bloating." And I think, oh no, she's going down the wrong line again. No, she's going wrong line. "We better scan your ovaries," she said. And no, that's not what I wanted either. And I ended up going for an ultrasound scan, then an abdominal ultrasound scan, a complete waste of money, and a pelvic ultrasound scan, which I didn't need. And so we're like 6 months down the line. And finally I went in and I said, "I think I need an endoscopy." And I got the endoscopy that I needed, and then the treatment was all sorted out. So it just shows you've just got to really, really be prepared. And I should have said, "Whoa, hang on, I'm a doctor. I know about these drugs, and this is what I think I need." And that's why being prepared is so important here. And taking someone with you, I think I'll do that next time I've got something.
Yeah, because I think you're right, because sometimes it can be quite an overwhelming experience, especially when they start talking about different medication or what else might go wrong in the future. I think having someone else with you can definitely help ask the right questions. Definitely.
Yeah, definitely. It's like being outside the headmaster's office or something like that, isn't it? Still.
So what can you tell us about, like, what can people do if they have any like problems or emergencies with all of this, or how do they deal with that then, Wendy and Jack?
Okay, so most rheumatology departments will have some kind of a device line or helpline service. Now, this is not a 999 type service, but it is available there for you if you have got a problem that can't be sorted out immediately. So the first thing, obviously, if you've got something that needs seeing to straight away, you will either go to your GP or go to the emergency department or call 911. Not 911. What's the number? 111. 911. Whatever that number is, thank you.
1111 or 999.
111 or 999, thank you, one of those. Yeah, but if you've got, so say your joints are flaring and they've not settled down with all the usual things, with all the usual painkillers and rest and things like that, and it's still going on, or you're getting frequent flares and you haven't got an appointment that's coming up, what you need to do is phone the advice line and see if you can speak to one of the specialist nurses. If none of the nurses are available, then find out the number of the consultant secretary, phone up and speak to the secretary and see if you can get your appointment expedited. The next step after that would be to go and see your GP. And if you're unable to get through to rheumatology, ask your GP to speak to the rheumatology team, and that will often help. So there are people out there that can help. And believe it or not, they do want to hear from you. If they don't hear from you, they think that you're fine. So because there's such a big workload, they will be firefighting constantly. So if you're in trouble, call and keep calling until you get the right answer. Don't take no for an answer, or don't just kind of think, oh, they're too busy or they're stressed or whatever. You're important and you should be getting the help that you need. Absolutely. Have you had times like that, Jack, when you've had to call?
Do you know what I have? Yes, and especially with my feet, I've had had times where I've had to email in and call them and say, look, I really need to see someone now. And to be fair, my hospital is really good in terms of booking me MRI scans. They were going to do a minor surgery on me. They were going to actually maybe cut. Well, they were thinking of cutting the tendons, because obviously sometimes your tendons can get shortened to try and release some of the pressure in my feet. So they are quite good at doing MRI scans. so yeah, I had to call, but sometimes probably as when you were saying, oh, you've got to call and email people. I was thinking when you're saying that, Wendy, oh, that sounds like a lot of energy. And when you're in the middle of a flare up,
you can't do it. Yes, very important. Yeah. Often have a right-hand person to do that for you. Can be really helpful to have a parent or a partner or a friend on the end of the phone, just holding your corner, really. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah. I was thinking, wow, you need to get a lot of energy to try and, sort that one out. But yeah, I think it is quite important because, to be fair, like when I've had to call up the hospital to get extra help, they have been really, really good and responsive, to be fair to them.
Excellent.
Yeah.
Christian, there's something else we haven't, well, actually, you've already sort of touched upon this as well, Jack, with some of your experience, but with all the appointments that like people may be going to, how do you say either like complain about the appointment you've had? If you've had, like, it sounds like earlier on, Jack, you mentioned that you had some like, less than ideal treatment from some of your doctors. Like, how do people like sort of either like phone up, or how do they complain about these things, or maybe even change their doctor as you've been able to?
Yeah. So I'll answer that in a couple of ways. So when I moved house, I moved GP. And I was quite lucky because the receptionist looked at my medication, and she's not supposed to do this. And she said, "Oh, well, why do you take methotrexate?" And I was like, "Oh, because I've got sciatica arthritis." And then she was like, "Oh, well, I've got that." And I was like, "Oh, could you recommend me the good hospital nearby?" And she was like, "No, they're all rubbish, Jack. Don't go to any of them." So because of that GP that I met, that receptionist, I always stayed at the hospital that I've always been seen at. But then the specialist that I changed was in my hospital, and I just had there's lots of incidents that kept happening, and it was one of the last ones, or the last time I saw her. She made a joke on the phone saying that she wasn't beating me up in the appointment to the person on the other end of the phone. And I just thought, you only see me like twice a year for like 10 minutes, and you just don't take it serious. And I've gone for the last 5 years, I've gone through like hell and back, and you just are there making jokes in the middle of the appointment. So from there, I basically made a complaint. I remembered the specialist that I really, really liked, and I basically requested to see him. And then from now on, I've always got to see him, basically. So, but that was a big change as well, because although she used to make lots of jokes and she was quite jovial, if I did make a request, she was quite good at getting that sorted. So there's always that worry when you've got arthritis, like, is it better the devil you know? Should you stick or twist? Because you don't want something worse than that's something that's sort of acceptable. So yeah, but maybe the lesson was I shouldn't have been worried about it, and I should have made the change that I needed to make the change sooner.
Yeah, I think it's important that you know that if you're not happy with what's been going on, you're definitely entitled to ask for a second opinion. Some people even ask for a third opinion. So your care will in no way be prejudiced if you do ask for a second opinion. And you can ask for a second opinion about a diagnosis as well if you don't feel confident in that person. So again, you just have to be assertive about that. And there is a process for making complaints as well. Of course, all hospitals will have a complaints process, and you can just start with a verbal, a verbal complaint, if you like, or you can put it in writing. And there are always patient liaison services in any hospital that can help you with a complaint, and they have a very efficient process that we'll go to. And I think it's important to be reassured that if you do make a complaint, that will be taken seriously, and the person that you're complaining about will not, in any way discriminate against you in the future, because the whole aim is to try and improve inpatient care. So all doctors know that they have to respond to complaints in an appropriate way within a certain amount of time. So don't worry about making a complaint. You're entitled.
That's good to know, because one of the concerns I did have was I'm going to make a complaint and then I'm going to have to see her again, it's going to be really awkward.
Yeah, absolutely. I think in a way, if you complain about somebody, they'll probably be extra attentive the next time, won't they? And and they'll know that you're someone to be reckoned with. And you're right, making jokes in that situation is not really appropriate, is it?
Yeah.
Great. So I'd like to have a bit of time at the end because we've got some questions coming in. So also, please, do remember there is the Q&A box there. If you do have any questions, now's your chance. Please do let us know. And so while you're busy typing those, just want to finish off with Jack. What, through all your experience and everything, and Wendy as well, if you would like to, but what advice from your experience would you give to people who are going through this process of going to their appointments?
Yeah, I would say the biggest changes that you've got to do is you've got to overcome the mental side of things. Like, it's incredibly isolating and lonely condition. You do go through a grieving period of person that you used to be able to become. And it does rob you a lot, but it's not to say that you can't come back from it. And you can come back from it, and you can get back to a place that you can be proud of and live a life that was very similar to the one that you had. But you just have to try and stay resilient, basically. And I think if you can find things that you can cope, like coping strategies, if you can find things that help you emotionally and mentally, that then in turn allows you to take control of your condition again, and it lets you feel like you're in control of your life again, rather than it's taking control of your life. And I think that's a really big positive stage. I think that's a really big positive step, because then you in turn become more assertive of it, and you really start, standing up to the condition. So yeah, I'd say try and seek things outside. And also the charities are wonderful. Arthritis Action has been fantastic. Versus Arthritis has been wonderful. There's lots of different support groups, and I honestly think making friends who have arthritis that might be similar to the same age as you, or not the same age, I think that having that support network is really, really, really vital.
Right. Thank you very much. Wendy, anything you'd like to add before we go to any
I
questions?
think it's just important to realise when you're in an appointment, that person you're talking to is an equal and in no way superior to you. And that, they might know a bit more about medicines and arthritis and things like that, but they don't know what it's like to be you. So, you're going to hopefully have a discussion of equals, really.
Yeah.
Okay, great. So let's move on to a few questions then. So, this one's more one for you, Wendy, I think, definitely. So this person's hospital have now stopped face-to-face consultations, supposed to be seen in 6 monthly, but just sent a series of questions to answer. So I was like, how is that supposed to help them?
My
What
goodness,
can they possibly do about that?
Pretty shocking. I mean, obviously through lockdown, a lot of face-to-face contact was shut down completely. Did some Zoom calls and did some phone calls, but I don't know how you can be assessed properly with arthritis if you haven't got somebody touching your joints occasionally. That does not sound like a good situation at all. What about, I don't know what they would do about emergencies in that situation. They must be seeing some people face to face.
Unsure.
I would complain, definitely. Yeah, definitely. I would have something to say about that.
Yeah, if you look up what the complaint process is, it's all done. Okay, so moving on to another one. Is there a long wait to see rheumatology consultants at the NHS at first stage? So when your GP suspects arthritis and refers you?
There certainly can be, and rheumatologists will be on the receiving end of your GP's letter, and then they will make a decision based on the quality of that letter, and the quality of those letters are very, very variable. So it's important for, if you don't get the result that you need, to you can ask your GP to write another letter to make sure that it's more urgent. If, for example, you can't work or you can't get out of bed, which sometimes is the case, then the rheumatologist at the other end will be able to prioritize a bit more easily. Obviously, they have to prioritize in order of need, but there is a long wait. People with suspected inflammatory arthritis supposed to be seen within weeks, but it has stretched now to months, and sometimes even longer than that. But keep persisting. I think keep being assertive with that, and don't just say, okay, I've got to wait 6 months and that's that. Keep going with keep persisting, I think.
Yeah.
Especially if you've got abnormal blood tests or you've got very obvious joint swelling. They'll still be prioritizing.
That's one of the problems though, isn't it, Wendy? You have to, I think when I could only go see a specialist, I had to have, it was either 6 or 8 of my joints had to be swollen. So
Yeah.
there is that waiting game of, I mean, I was quite lucky because mine just started swelling up after a few months and it just went everywhere. So in a weird way, I was quite lucky but there is that, sometimes you are just waiting for it to get worse before you get help, which is really frustrating at the early stage.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
There are a few questions coming in again about getting appointments. So I think Wendy's kind of answered that one already. So apologies for not answering all of those individually, but it is just that persistence, and sometimes you do have to keep on trying. But there was a question, as you mentioned, blood tests earlier, Wendy. So can a blood test show arthritis?
So not on its own, no. In conjunction with symptoms, yes. It can point towards arthritis sometimes. But if you turn it round, a normal blood test doesn't mean you don't have arthritis. So sometimes there will be obvious markers of arthritis in your blood, but if you don't have joint swelling, then you will not have arthritis at that time. So it's a combination of how you are and what the blood tests say.
Oh, and also on a nice one here, like there's another doctor on the webinar today who's they still write a list when they go to appointments and still have the
Oh, good question.
So it happens to all of you. Don't worry. Okay, 1 second. Let's find a couple more. We've got time for a few more. Okay, will acupuncture help with arthritis, and what are the chances of getting that treatment on the NHS?
Well, acupuncture comes and goes in terms of what NICE recommend. I think it had come back for pain. You may know this, Mark, or not. It went out of it was allowed for chronic pain, and then it was not allowed for chronic pain. So lots of doctors and other practitioners have got some training in acupuncture. So it kind of depends on which way the wind is blowing. So some specialists will offer acupuncture, yeah, and some physios definitely will. I think it is now back for pain.
I believe, yeah, I think that lots of osteos and physios will.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I mean, I have to admit, like the holistic, when I was getting Reiki done regularly, it had such a completely transformed everything. But that was outside of the NHS that I was getting that done.
Yeah.
With acupuncture, I always wanted to get it done, but then I know some of my medications don't make my blood clot as easily as it used to do. It just make my blood a bit thinner. So I was a bit worried about seeking acupuncture in case it kept
bleeding all over the place.
Yeah. Exactly, yeah.
And can it help? There was another question, can it help? Sometimes, yes, definitely sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, so there's one here, which is something we haven't touched on medication too much. Obviously, we can't go anything too individual on this, unfortunately, but how long should joints be affected before you know it's time to try a different biologic?
Well, that's a good question. They would usually give 3 months. So usually most of the, if it's going to work, it will usually work within about 12 weeks. So if by usually much quicker than that. Did you have that experience, Jack, that if it's going to work, it would usually work quite quickly?
I found with going on the biologic, within a few months, I definitely started to see, it really started to take effect. But then obviously I have changed my biologic, but kept on the same biologic, but just a different brand and I found sometimes that change can also help if you go onto a full biologic. or the same drug but different brands, basically.
Not the biosimilar. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly. So usually in 3 months, if you're not feeling better by 3 months, it's probably time to abandon it.
Okay. Sorry, just going through a few here. So we've answered some of these within the other questions as well. So just I would like to try and give you as many varied answers as possible. So bear with me 1 second, people. Okay, how do I separate PA and fibromyalgia pain? Is there anything that can be to differentiate the two?
Yeah, that is a very good question. So you will know, Jack, that when your arthritis is bad, you will be worse in the morning usually, and then you will gradually be better with exercise or through the day. And then again, you will be typically worse towards the end of the day after you've been walking around on your feet. So inflamed joints are almost always worse in the morning and better with exercise. Whereas fibromyalgia pain is the opposite, and fibro pain will not necessarily be in the joints. It could well be in between the joints, could be anywhere, and that will be worse with doing things rather than resting. Can be difficult to sort out what's what with fibro pain, but it's important that you try and figure out the difference.
Okay, great. And one very short one after this would be the last question, then we'll have to wrap it up. So someone has osteo and rheumatoid arthritis. Should they ask to seek someone other than rheumatology for the osteoarthritis?
That depends what it is. So rheumatologists can deal with osteoarthritis as well, but if, say, you have a very painful knee, then you may need to get some specialist physio on that, or you may need to go and talk to a surgeon potentially. So other specialists can definitely help with individual areas if they've got scope for improvement. Yeah, potentially. But rheumatologists can deal with osteo as well, for example, in terms of joint injections and general pain advice.
Okay, great. So that brings us to the end now, unfortunately, I'm afraid, everybody. So, but before you leave, I would like to, if you'd like any more information, relating to arthritis, please do visit our website, which is www.arthritisaction.org.uk. We've got loads of different resources on there that will help you self-manage your condition better, including diet, exercise, wellbeing resources, and a young adults hub as well. Just to let you know, a video of this webinar will be made available shortly on our YouTube channel, and we'll send you an email with a link to the recording once it's available. And finally, I just want to say a big thank you to Wendy and Jack for giving us your time and answering all of your questions. And also, of course, a big thank you to all of you for joining as well. So hopefully see you all soon, and I hope you have a lovely evening. Bye-bye, everybody.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Wendy. See ya.
Thank you. Bye.